It's the Newport This Week video podcast series. Each and every week, we're here on newportthisweek.com and on the Newport This Week YouTube channel. I'm Bill Bartholomew, and we follow up on our conversation last week with a different perspective on the same issue. And I'll read very briefly here from this week's edition of Newport This Week. The headline: Newport Council rejects Coggeshall School proposal. And in sum, the council shot down a proposed $1 million purchase and sale agreement with BCM Realty Partners to acquire and redevelop the former Coggeshall property. This happened on December 11th. It was a 4-3 vote, and the majority of the council took issue with the contract's inclusion of providing 1 and 2 bedroom apartments at the city-owned Van Zant Avenue property at, quote, market rates for workforce housing opportunities. Throwing out different definitions of workforce housing, dissenting councilors said market rates in Newport would be much higher than rents designed for middle-income individuals and families. One of the councilors who voted in favor of this proposal, and really somebody who is well known in our community in so many ways, is Council Vice Chair Lynne Ceglie, and joins us this morning on the podcast. Councilor, thanks for the time. Why did you vote in favor of this proposal?
Well, I voted in favor of it because I believe we need housing and we need to do something with the Coggeshall School. It's a dilapidated school building, and it's actually becoming a danger to the neighborhood. So, but that's not all. My feelings about this development is exactly what we need for middle class housing. And, the proof is in the pudding as far as I'm concerned with Cranston Calvert. It's the same developer, same rents, teachers, firefighters are living there. That's a great development, and the neighbors are happy. And, there are some differences with this one because the developer felt as though he needed to build 2 families on some lots that the city owns in order to make the project doable financially. This is going to be an extremely expensive property to develop, and some people have said, well, the 1 million is not enough, but really when you look at the building itself is a liability, and it's going to cost at least $1 million to take it down. And so, it's like it's whatever the market will bear as far as that goes.
Right.
So there's a lot of confusion and about the differences between the housing levels. And our goal was always between 80 and 120% of AMI. Some people felt that that was too high, but we already have 17% subsidized housing, and which is the highest in the state. So I think we're doing a good job as far as that goes. It's that missing middle that we need.
Right. And Newport is anomalous in that sense. It is, in fact, the highest percentage in the state, a mandated 10%. There are many communities that are far below that or below it in general or hovering right around that. It's a lot about language. The
It's
term affordable housing, capital A, workforce housing. The simple solution is that it's just even on an anecdotal level. A lot of people can't afford to live in Newport, not because they're not working, not because they're looking for anything other than a place to take the money that they make at their job and pay for rent or a purchase. And it's simply not enough, bottom line, in Newport.
right. And I think that goes for, well, housing is a national issue too. I mean, the country has not put enough money into affordable housing, period. I mean, that's a fact. So the issue isn't just Newport, but it's, Middletown and Portsmouth, they, people have a hard time living there as well. I think a lot of people are going to Tiverton. It seems a little bit more affordable, but it's a national problem. And but the problem is, if we wait for the perfect thing, nothing is ever going to happen. What is that old saying? Perfection is the enemy of the good. I mean, honestly, we have to come to some realization that when you talk about market rates, even at Coggeshall School, how much can you possibly charge for even 1,000 square foot bedroom on Van Zandt Avenue. I mean, you're not going to be able to charge 2,500, or somebody said 5,000. It's just not
Wow.
going to happen. That's not what the market is going to take. It's just not. Nobody will rent there.
Right.
So you say market rate. Well, what is the market rate for that area, the building? That, it's just that's what you have to look at. So everybody gets afraid of the word market rate, but I believe that the market rate really falls within the 80 to 120% of AMI. It's
Right.
just, so I'm just tired, I think, sometimes of everything just stopping because something's not perfect. I mean, look at Newport Grant. Are we going to let that happen at Coggeshall? I asked that at the council meeting. It's just sitting there. And, we did the North End urban plan. And frankly, now that I look at it, we should have waited to do that, because the North End urban plan really relied on information about the bridge realignment land, which we assumed would be like 20 or 30 acres, and it's probably going to be fewer than 10, so so now what have we got? We've got an empty building. The developer, it's so expensive to build anything right now. So it's just, we can't wait for the perfect thing. We just can't. You've got to, and the building is a liability. We have sometimes kids break windows. They, who knows? Kids go in there. There's mold, asbestos. Maybe a homeless person could go in there and start a fire. I don't know. I just feel as though it's something that has to be done.
Yeah, and you take a look at the Bell situation. It's interesting to hear you mention the liability piece, or the community risk of having a piece of property like that in disrepair, and it is in disrepair. I think people, if you haven't examined it and you're skeptical about this issue, I think that's a pretty solid argument in and of itself. This can't just stay as is indefinitely. You want to talk about community blight and risk. That's far riskier than market rate apartments at a rate that is, as you said, commensurate with salaries and, the reality on the ground, not a projected, yeah, somebody's going to come and pay $5,000 for a one-bedroom apartment on Van Zandt Avenue. I mean, in what fantasy world? In fact, that would actually be a dystopian world, because it would put us into a scenario where we're pricing out. There is no firefighter, there's no teacher that is going to be able to pay $5,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment in Newport, Rhode Island, or frankly anywhere.
Right, but that building would not accommodate that kind of rent. That's just not, it's not reasonable. It's just not. It's like, so I mean, I see us stopping something that was very doable, very and we've had very little interest in this project too. I mean, what we had with the RFP was, we had one group, Church Community Housing, that wanted to put luxury apartments and subsidized housing on that property. Okay. Then we had, and they didn't have the money they'd had to raise the money still. And then we had another proposal for someone who needed tax credits to put in apartments in the building. And I think there were fewer apartments also that they were proposing. So, what we had was what we had from BCM, and it was the best offer that we had gotten. So, it's what the market will bear, and I believe it's within that 80 to 120% of AMI.
Where does this go from here? What's the next step?
Well, of course, we're in the middle of the holidays now, but I mean, I'm hoping that BCM will come back with another proposal, or the city will somehow come to its senses and say, let's do something with this property. So, and the other thing you got to consider, and I think this happened with Newport Grand as well, is the more we stop things from happening, or from what I consider would be progress, it scares off developers. they're like, oh, I'm not going to deal with Newport. I mean, it's too difficult. You got to go through too many regulatory things. You've got everything's so expensive. Rogers High School is a perfect example of how difficult it is to build anything on a piece of property, and you've got old dumps, it's very difficult. So if you make it even harder for developers, they're not going to come.
Simple as that.
Yeah. And I've already spoken to a developer about it, and he was like, absolutely. He goes, Newport is a very difficult place to do business in.
Right.
And we make it harder.
Yeah,
So,
because there's already the fundamental challenges of some of the last mile, or frankly, not even necessarily last mile, some of the primary, whether you're talking about pipes or electric, and then the zoning issues with historic properties. These are good things. These are attributes for the city that there are, in fact, so many historic properties. But it goes on. And then you take a look at Newport Grand, you take a look at Carpianato, and every single time I'm in Newport, I don't know, 3, 4 times a week, I come over that bridge or I leave going back over the bridge. And as I'm making that left turn, I think, what world are we living in right now where there's such a squeeze on not only housing, but appropriate commercial development as well? There's a need for that. We see collapsing malls, and a lot of retailers are saying, yeah, we don't want to be in a mall. We want to be in the right community center. We've got a perfect opportunity with Newport Grand, and it's frozen.
well, and let's not forget that that proposal had 200 units of housing. So, and then we have counselors who, run for council, people run for council, people who are on the council going, we need housing, we need housing, we need housing. And then they go, oh, no, that's not good enough. Sorry. It's, you can tell that I'm frustrated by it. And I just want to see progress. In the past, I believe that we had sometimes a more pragmatic approach to things. It's like, well, this isn't perfect, but it's moving us in a forward direction. And, we can tweak it as we go, but let's just move forward. Now, those units that, the city on the city land that was going to be sold to BCM, he needed those properties because those would be much less expensive to build. So in order to finance the rehab of the school. So
Was that
it, and the neighbors were mostly worried about those units, but Jean Marie Napolitano had said, well, let's not allow any more parking on the street. It's just, so I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, we made a mistake, just like we made a mistake with Newport Grand.
It'll be interesting to see what BCM proposes in a revised response to and correct me if I'm wrong, would this essentially be a revised response to an RFP at this point in terms of coming back to the table, or how would that look? Is it just simply an open negotiation? Like, how does this get reintroduced as a resolution?
Well, I think, there's always, I have a feeling that it's just it would be just a revised. I mean, don't quote me on that one.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a revised one because, we had already accepted their proposal. So, a year or so ago. And that's another thing. It's like, what happened in the last year? I kept saying, what's happening with Coggeshall? What's happening with Coggeshall? It's just, everything is slow, and let's move it on. Let's go.
That's the attitude. That's the attitude we have to take. And Speaker Shikarchi would wholeheartedly agree. And of course, as we've seen around the state, whether it's Johnston in a recent kind of bizarre meltdown at a zoning board or planning board hearing, Narragansett with some of their efforts. Sometimes the challenge for housing, you can legislate all you'd like on Smith Hill and create a bundle of bills that are to spur development or expand opportunities with ADUs, things like this. If municipalities aren't on board, it means 0.0.
Zero. Yeah, it does. So, I mean, I'm going to keep pushing this and keep, trying to, find some way of making this happen. you know, it was funny, you know, when Cranston Calvert was being proposed, people were saying, oh, well, there's going to be more um, activity in that area and the impact of the cars and everything. And I'm thinking, my kids went to Cranston Calvert School. I mean, when you think about the impact of a school on a neighborhood with school buses and parents and teachers finding places to park and delivery trucks, I mean, there is no way that you're going to have that level of activity, and you don't. And the neighbors are very happy with the Cranston Calvert building. There have been a few things here and there, you know, this light is shining or whatever, but you know, it's not something that can't be fixed. These are very doable fixes.
Yeah, practical solutions to a crisis. It's we hear housing crisis. It sounds like like a TV news headline. It's a crisis because you're seeing people who are just simply not able to live in Newport, Aquidneck Island, and now it's starting to become a Rhode Island and regional issue where people are completely disoriented and not able to find a place to live. It's as basic as that, and it's we should be able to do better than that. And with
I
our
agree. I totally agree. But we have to have the units. And you know, it's kind of interesting. I mean, the way people live is very different from the way they used to live. I mean, you would have three-family homes, and now those two or three family homes have been turned into single family homes, and that is probably the biggest problem with our housing issue right now. And I'm guilty of it. I changed my two family to a one family when my kids got older. I mean, we needed more space, you know, but it's how we live now. We all want to have more space, right? So I was on the Doris Duke Awards Committee for the historic preservation, and we went to see two properties that are absolutely gorgeous, and they've been turned into single family homes, but these buildings had 5 or 6 apartments in them. So right then and there we lost, you know, 7 or 8 maybe apartments, that have now turned to single family. So more than just the short-term rentals, I think that has been the biggest problem. I remember Guy Weston telling me that we had lost something like 5,000 units through people just converting their homes. So, you know, the short-term rentals, we banned them in residential neighborhoods. Any non-owner occupied short-term rental is banned. And you know, we're trying to do a better job on enforcement with that. But there's nothing in the housing workbook that's for Rhode Island that says that short-term rentals is the reason for the housing shortage. It was really about quality of life and making that change.
Yeah, no question. It was definitely a multi-pronged situation that is trending in the right direction, at least at this point. After what was a wild, wild west environment, I can say for sure. I did a nationally syndicated investigative piece for PBS on Newport short-term rental problems in 2020, and we found nearly 800 unregistered Airbnbs in
Oh
that
yeah.
time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it was like, wait a second,
Mhm.
exactly what you said. Even if you want to take out the housing crisis piece, this some of the folks we interviewed complained about either kind of two ends of the spectrum. One would be all of a sudden now I've got what used to be a quiet residential street or an active but normal active street. I've got some jabroni at 2 o'clock in the morning yelling out the window, you know, waving a
Mhm.
college football flag and so on and so forth. Or conversely, you have dark sections that used to be filled with families, now stretches of major thoroughfares and residential areas that are just quiet, desolate areas in the middle of winter. And that's equally as troubling.
That's right. I remember I had a neighbor who, now this has always been my neighborhood has always been a very, um, what, it's quiet, but there've always been like single family homes. And then someone bought a house across the street, and now my street is very, very narrow, and he was renting it out, and he wasn't living there, you know. This was before the ban. And all I could hear were those suitcases clunking up the stairs. And it was just like, you know, I mean, and then people you don't know, they're around. It was uncomfortable. And so something had to be done about that.
Yeah, no
But
question.
who live in their homes and rent 2 bedrooms have a right by right, they can do that.
No,
So,
no.
that's something that we cannot stop. We can't change that. That's a state law.
Yeah, and that's what Airbnb was intended for and what it's most effective for in terms of being a community pillar. Counselor, thank you for your work and thank you for your time today. And we'll certainly keep an eye on the Coggeshall situation. A revised RFP may be forthcoming. We'll have to see how it plays out. But happy holidays and thanks for your time.
You and you too. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.